Yankee Station, pilots of the USS Midway launch into the skies of Southeast Asia. Over Vietnam, they face a fiery crucible of unrelenting combat. The men of this remarkable carrier will make history, scoring the first and last MiG kill of the war. Now, using state-of-the-art computer animation, you're in the cockpit as pilots of the Midway go head-to-head against skilled and determined foes. Experience the battle. Dissect the tactics. Relive the dogfights with the MiG killers of Midway. June 17, 1965. The early days of the Vietnam War. Strike aircraft launched from the deck of the USS Midway on Yankee Station, 100 miles from the North Vietnamese coast. The aircraft assemble over the Gulf and push into North Vietnam. They'll hit the Thanh Hoa Railroad Bridge, a strike meant to slow the movement of supplies to the south. Among them are two F-4 Phantoms led by Commander Lou Page with his radar intercept officer, or RIO, Lieutenant.
Our mission as the F-4 fighters was a tar cap. We were target cap in front of the target to the north.
The Target Combat Air Patrol stays close to the target to intercept hostile enemy aircraft. Page and Smith's wingman is Lieutenant Dave Batson with his RIO, Lieutenant Commander Rob DeRemus. These aviators from the USS Midway have a date with destiny. On this mission, they will score the first MiG kills of the Vietnam War.
The attack boys had done their thing. They had just called feet wet, and I said, let's make one more orbit. We were about 12,000 feet, maybe 13,000 feet. We turn the orbit, and just as we sweep about 360 with the nose of the airplane, two targets pop up. That's good. Now, was it Navy? I don't think so. We didn't have that many Navy out there. Was it Air Force? Oh, I don't know, but I'm hoping. We got to look at it.
This early in the war, there is no way to ID the contacts electronically. They'll have to get a visual. The bogies are at 11 o'clock, 2,000 feet up, range 32 miles. Page and Smith begin the shadow boxing by making a slight turn to the right, coaxing the bogies to turn towards them. The Americans curve away, but the bogies don't bite. The Phantoms roll back to the left, taking a more aggressive tack.
What do I want to happen? I want those MiGs to turn into me. Fingernail trick. Right now you can't see if my fingernails are dirty. If he turns into me, you can see if my fingernails are dirty.
Smith orders Batson and DeRemus into a trail position.
They whoop, drop back. Didn't say how far. He knew. He should be 1.5 miles to 2 miles behind us in trail.
In the front, Page and Smith will gain positive visual ID on the bogies. Batson and DeRemus will target the lead contact on radar and fire as soon as it is confirmed hostile. Page and Smith will target the second bogey.
Going in, then I go to ICS, intercom, I said, Lou, it should be right on your nose. Right on your nose, just slightly above. I didn't want to put him on the nose and put him under it. All of a sudden, he said, tally-ho, 4. That's the first I knew there were 4. He said, MiGs, MiGs, because the old boy turned like this into us, round wingtips, dirty fingernails.
The contacts are confirmed hostile. 4 MiG-17s in 2 elements. They're already locked up and in range for the Phantom's Sparrow missiles.
I said, shoot, shoot, shoot. You never say fire in an airplane. I heard just whoop. I felt the missile leave the airplane.
Page and Smith's missile slams into the MiG-17. Explosion takes down the MiG's wingman.
I heard boola boola. That means a hit. And at the same time I looked out, here goes the Sparrow missile across my starboard wing from old Batman that was in the back.
Batson's missile strikes the second MiG element. Again, debris knocks out the wingman. The Phantom pilots have struck an historic blow. The war's first kills of North Vietnamese MiGs. They will later get official credit for 2 kills, with 1 damaged. The victory was achieved by the men of a remarkable carrier, the USS Midway. Its proud history began in the months following World War II.
During World War II, the aircraft carrier came to prominence amongst navies because its offensive reach was so much greater and more powerful than any other type of platform, including the battleship.
When launched in September 1945, Midway was the epitome of a World War II carrier, but the race of technology would demand vast changes.
Jet aviation posed a severe challenge to carrier aviation as it was at the end of World War II. Jet aircraft are heavier, they require more power to launch, they require more space to recover because of faster landing speeds.
In 1955, Midway was rebuilt with several jet-age innovations. The steam catapult to launch heavier aircraft, mirrored landing lights, and an angled deck. But it wasn't until March of 1965 in the Vietnam War that the Midway first saw combat. The cruise only lasted 9 months, but it became clear Midway again needed upgrades to accommodate the rigors of an air war over Indochina. She was decommissioned in February 1966 and spent the next 4 years undergoing the most extensive modernization effort the Navy had attempted up to that time.
After a 4-year rebuild on the Midway, the Navy got a brand new carrier out of the deal. She went from a 2.8-acre flight deck to nearly 4 acres in flight deck. She could handle any of the aircraft that were currently on the Navy's drawing boards and was able to operate for extended periods of time and function every bit as efficiently as her large deck sisters.
Midway is again ready to do battle over North Vietnam. May 18th, 1972, Yankee Station. A strike is launched from the deck of Midway. The aircraft assemble over the Gulf and push into the north. They'll target North Vietnamese infrastructure in the Haiphong area, part of an intense air campaign to stem the recent invasion of South Vietnam. Flying as part of the mission's combat air patrol are two F-4 Phantoms, led by Lieutenant Henry Bart Bartholomew with his Rio, Lieutenant Orrin Brown.
I got put on the mission that afternoon as a spare aircraft. The lead aircraft had hydraulic problems on the catapult, so it had to be taxied off the catapult. We were launched consequently.
Bartholomew's wingman is Lieutenant Pat Arwood, with his backseater, Lieutenant Mike Taco Bell.
Our mission was to position ourselves between Haiphong and Kemp Airfield to interdict any MiGs that might challenge the strike force.
Our mantra became MiGs in May for Midway. And we had that written on the blackboard in the ready room in big letters, and so we were all convinced that we were going to do it.
As the Phantoms approach Kemp Airfield, their radio crackles to life. Bandits in the area. Their pulse quickens. They begin a slow descent. Bart Bartholomew scans the sky, sure to call out any threat to his wingman, Pat Arwood.
As I looked north to clear his 6 o'clock position, I was able to see a couple of silver aircraft. And I knew that we didn't have anything that was painted that silver. So I knew they were MiGs.
The Phantoms prepare for combat. It will be a baptism of fire. In their first mission over the north, they'll get their chance to score MiGs in May for Midway. May 18, 1972. Two F-4 Phantom crews from the USS Midway are about to taste air combat over North Vietnam for the first time. Above Kemp Airfield, they've spotted two MiG-19s.
We took off after him. I wanted Pat to be about 3,000 feet above me and cover me as I went down after him.
Arwood pitches up. Bartholomew noses down and banks right. Roaring in over Kemp, Bartholomew rolls left into position behind the enemy.
They became aware of him. They both pickled off their external wing tanks. There was fuel streaming out of their wing tanks. So my thought was, seeing that they still had fuel in their wing tanks, so they probably had full internal fuel just like us.
I followed them as best I could. I didn't quite have the energy to pull inside them. In order to keep my energy up, I had to stay sort of nose slightly behind and not pulling quite as many G's as they were pulling inside my turn. Basically, your nose is pointed instead of ahead of the aircraft, it's pointed behind the aircraft, and you're sort of following them around like this in a lagging position.
As Bart was pushing the MiGs around the circle, and they were staying in the circle, I was in a high position, and I did a series of high yo-yos.
The yo-yo maneuvers will take advantage of the Phantom's raw power. Each move will improve his angle off the MiG's tail for a heat-seeking missile shot.
I did the first high yo-yo, the dive down and back up. I did another dive down and back up, and I was starting to lose position. So on the third one, I knew that I was coming to the inside of the circle. I was starting to crowd Bart. I was coming too close to him. So at that point, I decided to fire to break up the MiGs.
I felt a missile come off the airplane and saw a MiG-19 that absolutely cranked it around so hard, and the missile went right by his tailplanes.
The MiGs split up. Bartholomew follows the wingman. Arwood stays on the leader. He buries the stick in his gut, straining to keep in trail of the tight-turning MiG-19.
You pull hard and the plane is passing you. You're leaning forward in your straps. You're craning, turning very hard to the left, in this case to the left, to try to see back over your shoulder. But he had turned so far inside of me that I just lost sight of it completely.
Arwood's heart races as he searches frantically for the MiG. He pitches vertical, climbing to 4,000 feet. Still no sign of the enemy. Meanwhile, Bartholomew chases the second MiG.
I was losing enough energy, so I just knew that I had to get out and gather more energy back.
Bartholomew unloads G and quickly distances himself from the MiG. He extends to the west 2 miles before pitching back to re-enter the fight. He's gained precious airspeed, but lost sight of the bandit.
Orrin still had sight, which is a great testament to the value of having 4 eyes in a cockpit. So Orrin was able to talk me onto him.
The MiG is at 10 o'clock low, sweeping left in an effort to maneuver into Bartholomew's 6. Bartholomew's instincts kick in. He'll lure the enemy closer. Then, at the last possible second, he'll pop his nose up, hit his speed brakes and flaps, and force the MiG to overshoot. It's a bold maneuver that will turn the tables in an instant.
Orrin's calling the MiG, and he's calling the MiG, and he's calling the MiG with position, clock code, and so forth. And I waited until the MiG got to be about 830 low, and I could see him start to pull his nose towards me.
Bartholomew yanks the stick back and performs the maneuver. The heavy Phantom pitches up as the MiG is thrown outside of his turn.
So I popped my speed brakes and my flaps for about 5 seconds. And I put them right back in, and I was about upside down like so. And as I went to the outside of the turn, now I'm slower. He popped it right out in front of me. And now we're canopy to canopy, going just about straight up.
As they rocket into the air, the MiG inches out in front of Bartholomew. But the Phantom's airspeed is plummeting. He can't keep climbing much longer.
Fortunately for me, he had the same problem, and he decided to dump his nose just a fraction of a second prior to when I did. So what happened was, at that point, he slid out slightly in front of me. I couldn't have been more than 200 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet behind him. Way too close to shoot a missile.
He's in perfect position for a gun kill. But the F-4 doesn't have a gun. He throttles back, carefully trying to separate himself for a missile shot without losing too much airspeed. To the east, Pat Arwood continues his anxious search.
I kept looking for MiGs, looking for my lead, looking for anybody that I could find. And I didn't see him. So I was really getting concerned about that.
I looked down, and I see the runway at Kemp Airfield with all these bomb craters that had been patched. And I'm thinking, if we go down here, it's not going to be real friendly.
Finally, at 8 o'clock low, Arwood spots the MiG. His enemy rocks back and forth, apparently searching for the Americans.
I was very impressed to see him at such low altitude doing those wing rolls. I was almost directly over him, so I actually eased my turn and flew ahead a little bit as he continued to turn. Then I overbanked, maybe 130 degrees of bank, and started pulling my nose down toward him.
The Phantom swoops in on his unsuspecting prey. It looks like Arwood will have an easy kill. But abruptly, the MiG brakes.
He apparently picked me up when he was left wing down. And then again, he made a very, very hard left-hand turn into me.
Through the tight turn, the enemy again slips from view. But suddenly, Bart Bartholomew roars into the fight. Bartholomew is chasing his MiG here. Harwood is here. His MiG has slipped out of view here. As Bartholomew flies past, Harwood's MiG will turn in pursuit. Bartholomew thunders through. Harwood's MiG rolls right.
He reversed and then crossed across my nose. And as he crossed, then I was able to roll back into a perfect firing position. He was slightly above the horizon. I was maybe 10 degrees off his tail.
The MiG's concern for his fellow pilot is his undoing. Harwood fires.
It just came within maybe 10 feet or so to the right side of his tail, and it detonated. But initially, it didn't appear to be any damage to the plane.
Pat says, geez, I missed. And about just as he said that, this big silver piece of fuselage came off. Looked up, boom. I see the MiG-19 up there, and a heavy wing rock, canopy comes off, and a seat comes out, and poof, here's this guy in the chute.
Harwood's MiG disintegrates just behind Bartholomew. Seconds later, Bartholomew gets good tone on his heat-seeking Sidewinder. His finger closes around the trigger. On their first mission over the north, Bartholomew and Harwood have scored MiGs in May for the Midway.
Here we were, both of us. All we had to do is make a 90-degree starboard turn, and we were right there in combat spread, 3/4 mile apart, and we were heading east, and we were heading out.
The MiG killers beat a hasty retreat to the Gulf of Tonkin. The MiG kills are only a small part of Midway's contribution to the air war over Vietnam on its third combat cruise. Flying off its deck, F-4 Phantoms, A-6 Intruders, and A-7 Corsairs mined key harbors, struck petroleum reserves, and destroyed key infrastructure targets in the north.
The advantage of having the carriers operating in the Gulf of Tonkin is that you were able to take an entire air group and send a couple of dozen aircraft against a single target relatively close to where that target was. So you would minimize the amount of warning that the air defense network the North Vietnamese had to react to that.
Midway continued daily combat operations over the north through the end of May. Just 6 days after Bartholomew and Harwood's dogfight, another pair of Phantoms will find themselves in the most perilous situation American airmen can face: a perfectly executed North Vietnamese ambush. May 23rd, 1972. Two F-4 Phantoms from USS Midway soar over the North Vietnamese countryside. They're flying combat air patrol for a strike against targets in Hai Phong, part of the continued effort to cripple the invasion of South Vietnam. The flight lead is Lieutenant Commander Muggs McEwen, with his Rio, Lieutenant Jack Ench.
Muggs and I don't know, we kind of hit it off early on. We had a sort of a warped sense of humor between us in the cockpit.
I used to tell him, I said, Jack, this is the one thing, I never wanted to die surprised. If my last conscious thought is what the hell was that, I'll hunt you through eternity and you'll never rest.
Flying off Muggs's wing is Lieutenant Mike Rabb, with his Rio, Lieutenant Junior Grade Ken Crandall. As they descend towards their cap station, their radio crackles to life.
Immediately called them and said, we have a vector for bandits, 278, 70 miles. And Jack said, Roger. I said, Jack, did he say bandits? He said, yeah, I think he did. I said, confirm bandits. He said, hey, Oswald, this is Bullet. Can you confirm bandits? He said, Roger, I confirm bandits. You're clear to arm, clear to fire. That's the defining moment of a fighter pilot.
Muggs adjusts his heading and moves toward the bandits, maintaining airspeed in minimum afterburner to conserve fuel. But their flight path takes them into the heart of enemy airspace, directly over Kep Airfield.
I can remember thinking to myself, man, this wasn't in our game plan. I don't think I like this very much.
Suddenly, Muggs gets a visual on the bandits. MiG-19s.
I looked down, and on the glint of the cartridge down low were two airplanes coming at us. And so I said, tally out 200 ridgeline, 7 miles. And Jack says, let's get them. I'm right behind you.
In combat spread, the Phantoms merge head-on with the MiGs. Ground clutter prevents any radar lock. This dogfight will be decided the old-fashioned way. Fearless, the enemy streaks through the American formation.
We had our fangs out, and oh boy, here's a quick kill, and we're going to get these guys.
Muggs calls for a cross-turn.
You pull up, and then you go this vertically and come back. It's a way of reversing course a minute, and you can keep your eye on the target.
Muggs goes high. Rab goes low. But just as they enter the maneuver, disaster.
Halfway through the turn, it was raining MiGs.
4 MiG-17s scream in directly towards them.
I said, oh, God. That's when I said they just called the bet and they raised us about 4. And I said, well, Jack, let's go. And I said, it's going to be homicide.
The Soviet-built MiG-17 is a swift and formidable opponent in close-quarters combat. At low speed, it can easily outturn the Navy F-4 Phantoms. The Americans are here. The MiG-17s are in a diving attack here, trying to hit the Phantoms while they're busy chasing the MiG-19s here.
They were coming down on us. I said, oh, God. So we just started extending out.
The lead MiG-17 roars past Muggs, canopy to canopy.
It passed so close that, I mean, you could feel the airplane pass by.
Muggs will move aggressively against the MiGs. He'll use a classic air combat maneuver called a low yo-yo. He'll rudder down, then pull the nose up, cutting inside the MiG's turn and increasing his airspeed. Muggs stomps the rudder, heart pounding. He breathes in ragged gasps through the crushing maneuver. As he pulls his nose through the horizon, he spots a MiG-19 just in front of him. He smoothly switches targets, the best strategy when surrounded by enemies. Muggs's best option for a shot is to barrel roll to the outside, improving his angle off the MiG's tail. Muggs pitches up and rolls. He skillfully coordinates the stick, rudder, and throttles as he rolls again. But suddenly, everything changes.
I saw a MiG-17 back at our 8 o'clock. And it wasn't shooting yet. It was coming up there, but he was gaining ground on us. So I told Muggs, I said, we got one at 8 o'clock, and he's starting to be a threat.
We had this working relationship where I say, Jack, don't ever tell me break right or break left, or you just tell me what's back there. I do the pilot stuff, you do the RO stuff.
The MiG on their tail begins to pull lead. The enemy's heavy cannon looms menacingly. Muggs is too low to dive away. The North Vietnamese pilot has him cornered. May 23rd, 1972. F-4 Phantom pilot Muggs McEwen and his Rio, Jack Hench, are staring down the barrel of a gun, a MiG-17, locked on their tail.
And he said, okay, that's it, Jack. Somebody's going to walk home, and it's not going to be us.
Desperate times call for desperate measures. Muggs has a patented last-ditch maneuver for just this situation. He'll apply full forward stick and bottom rudder. Then, just as the enemy tries to compensate for the move, he'll pull hard back and boot top rudder. For a moment, the F-4 will depart or become uncontrollable and backflip. Muggs jams the stick forward and stomps the left rudder pedal, then pulls hard back. The F-4 tumbles. It's a maneuver as spectacular as it is gutsy, the domain of only the greatest fighter pilots.
We departed the airplane at about, 1,500 feet, and it tumbled end over end, and Jack is saying, what the hell are you doing?
I'm trying to keep my eye on this MiG, and all of a sudden, I'm being thrown around in the cockpit, and I'm what are you doing up there? Then all of a sudden, the airplane scooped out, and he was in control again, and I'm looking back, and I finally got my eyes back there looking, where's that MiG? And it's gone. And he said, there's one right in front of us.
The astonished North Vietnamese pilot has been forced out in front of Muggs and Hench. Muggs gets good tone on his Sidewinder missile and fires.
MiG-17 could turn on a dime, and he defeated the missile's tracking solution. So one of our Sidewinders was gone. We had 3 left.
The MiG-17 stays in his right turn, but Muggs can't pursue. He barrel rolls. With so many MiGs, he must keep moving, never sticking with one target for long.
Just trying to keep my energy up and keep from being predictable.
Muggs rolls out with another MiG-17 just off his nose. He gets good tone and fires a second AIM-9. But again, the tight-turning MiG defeats the missile lock.
This time, well, this is probably on TV, so we won't say the words we were saying in the cockpit, but we were very frustrated at this point.
I said, you're not going to give it to me, are you, God? We're going to have to go home and tell everybody making excuses how we missed 4 MiGs.
But surrounded by the enemy, there's no time to reflect. The punishing fight goes on.
I'm checking back, and all of a sudden I see one at 4 o'clock, and this guy had made ground on us, and he was up there, and he was actually starting to shoot his 37mm cannon at us. And I called him Muggs. I said, 4 o'clock, tracking and shooting. And he looked back on it like that and said, holy expletive.
Orange tracers rip past the canopy. Muggs breaks hard into the attack. When suddenly, the MiG ceases fire.
He just pulled out in front of me here like this, and I looked up, and from my time in the MiG-17, it just went, you can't see me.
Muggs has managed to slip into the MiG's blind spot under its nose. To turn the tables, he'll chop the throttle, push forward on the stick, and open the speed brakes. The gut-wrenching negative G maneuver and loss of speed will force the MiG out in front of him. It's another brilliant move by a brilliant pilot. Muggs jams the stick forward and cuts power. The Bandit screams by in front of the Phantom.
It was about 50 feet away from his cockpit, where we could pick that guy out of a police lineup.
The MiG noses down and rolls back and forth in an apparent effort to reacquire the elusive American. For the third time, Muggs gets good tone on his enemy and fires a Sidewinder.
He broke into the missile. I thought, oh, God, we missed again. And I was feeling the depths of despair, and all of a sudden his tail came off.
I saw the missile go by the airplane, and I saw it go off, and I think it was proximity fuse. The piece of the airplane went off, and then pretty soon, the explosion, we saw the guy eject. So that was our first kill.
After 5 agonizing minutes of superhuman maneuvering, Muggs and Ench have a kill. But there's no time to celebrate. They spot their wingman, Mike Rabb, in the weeds with a MiG in hot pursuit.
I'm turning left, and I see Mike Rabb. He's heading north at the time with a MiG-17 all over him, just shooting. He's got tracers all around him.
Rabb is here. Muggs is here. He will guide Rabb on a heading that will drag the North Vietnamese in front of Muggs.
I said, okay, Mike, roll away from him and extend out to the east.
Rabb drags the enemy MiG across his nose. Muggs pitches down. The expert MiG killer easily swings in on his enemy's 6. The MiG's tailpipe glows crimson just off his nose, a perfect target against the empty sky. Muggs fires his 4th Sidewinder of the day. The missile tracks straight and true.
Euphoric in the cockpit, looking at us soaking wet from sweat and drinking all the water we had and pounding on the canopy going, we realized what we just did. We got two big guns.
The rest of the MiGs have bugged out. They've lost their nerve in the face of such determined warriors. Euphoric, the Americans head back to the Midway. But the fighting isn't over. Before the conflict ends, the enemy will strike over water and bring the war to the Midway. January 12, 1973, the closing days of the Vietnam War. 2 Navy Phantoms catapult from Midway into an overcast sky. They're flying BARCAP, a barrier combat air patrol between the coast of North Vietnam and Midway. They'll intercept any MiGs that head out over the water towards American ships in the Gulf. Flying lead is Lieutenant Vic Kovaleski and his Rio, Jim Wise. Flying off his wing is Lieutenant Pat Arwood with his Rio, Ensign Lynn Oates. They arrive on station, and after a short time, the air controller breaks in over the radio. There's a bandit airborne, heading straight for Midway.
It was a real threat to the Midway, not only MiGs, but even surface craft to come out to challenge the carrier, because it would be quite a prize to sink or damage the Midway.
Now, she did have some point defense systems at the time, such as a surface-to-air missile defense battery. But just as in the Second World War, the primary defense for an aircraft carrier is her own embarked fighters.
The air controller vectors them in the direction of the enemy MiG.
As we were descending, Vic picked him up. It was about 11 o'clock position, and we were down in the 10,000-foot range. The MiG was maybe 12 miles or so.
The MiG is heading toward the Americans. At 2 miles, the North Vietnamese spots the big Phantoms and makes an about-face.
The MiG appeared to be heading toward us, but they very quickly reversed course and started heading due north.
The communist pilot is in no mood to fight. Kowaleski pitches up and cuts back right to improve his angle off the MiG's tail. The powerful Phantom closes on its prey. The MiG breaks right to shake his pursuer. Kowaleski and Arwood must be cautious. Kowaleski closes to missile range. He gets good tone on his Sidewinder and fires.
Dick's first missile detonated by the tail. I'm sure that the MiG pilot knew that he was damaged, and it was probably more damage than we realized from a distance.
Kowaleski fires another Sidewinder.
When the second missile flew up the tailpipe and it exploded, the MiG pitched up violently into 90-degree vertical position and just virtually stopped and rolled off to the right-hand side and then plummeted into the water.
This will prove to be the last MiG kill of the Vietnam War. On January 27, 1973, the Paris Peace Accords are signed, and American involvement in the Vietnam War comes to an end. Between 1965 and 1973, America claimed over 200 MiGs, 8 of which were downed by pilots of the USS Midway.
The Midway had the benefit in providing the platform from which the very first and the very last confirmed MiG kills of the entire Vietnam War was scored.
Midway served throughout the Cold War, modernized again in 1986 and equipped with the new F-18 Hornet. She goes into combat for the last time in January 1991 as flagship of the Arabian Gulf Battle Force. During 43 days of combat, Midway flies 3,339 combat sorties, averaging 121 per day, delivering 2,000 tons of bombs and missiles on enemy targets. It is a stunning achievement and Midway's swan song.
In 1991, right after the successful conclusion of Operation Desert Storm, it was decided that the Midway would be retired a few years ahead of schedule. Age was catching up with her, and the fact that she just was too small to be operating the carrier aircraft that we had in the inventory.
After 47 years of service, Midway is decommissioned at Naval Air Station North Island, San Diego, April 11, 1992. As testament to her proud service in Vietnam and the Persian Gulf, she was spared the scrapyard.
It is now a museum in San Diego and is available for public viewing to look at a ship that basically was a milestone in carrier aviation history.
It is a fitting legacy for the men and women who served on Midway and the bold airmen who launched from her deck. Men who flew into hostile skies, faced determined and skilled opponents, and returned to Midway as MiG killers.